Greetings, Pilgrims. Welcome to another episode of the Polygon Pilgrimage, and today I have my team members here with me from the just finished Level Up Jam, and we created a game in just 2.5-ish short days, so it was quite the rush. So on the call with me, I have here Monsoon EXE, Rich. You may know him from the Discord for the Pilgrimage. We have Toxic Fume, aka Gordon, and we have Eddie, goes by Knight. Yeah, there they are. Not with us today is Hector, who was our audio guy, who did a fantastic job. As you play the game, you will hear this fantastic audio. So really quickly, we wanted to talk about what the theme was we chose, which was the unconventional means of delivery. Yes, it's an old Ludum Dare theme, but we chose it kind of randomly. We put a whole bunch of themes into a hat and kind of filtered down some, and then we just chose a random one, and that was the one that we chose. So I'll pass it over to one of the other guys if they want to talk about exactly what we chose and how we came about it. You guys want to talk about that for a second?
Sure, yeah. I'll speak to that. So we spent a couple days gathering different themes. We just kind of took polls from around the internet, asked our friends and family, and then we had a meeting a couple days ahead of time where we culled some of those. We went through the list and we took out ones that just weren't any good. We took out a couple themes or a couple entries that were mechanics more than themes. So we moved things like a single or like 2 button inputs, or like up is down, or there were a couple mechanics that we pulled from that list because they didn't fit. And then we did a random number generator and we picked one, and that's the one we stuck. We got a unconventional delivery.
Yeah, and from there we started talking about, I think, Rich, it was you who mentioned what's the first kind of thing that everybody thinks about delivering, which is pizzas. And through our conversation, I was saying, what's the craziest way you could deliver pizza? We talked about maybe like a paperboy type thing, dropping it on people's houses. And we ended up with a pretty crazy method would be if you fire it from a cannon. I just threw that as a joke. And then we ended up, you're on a pirate ship. All right, so next up, let's talk about really quick. Our objective was to make the pirate ship game. So it was delivering pizzas via a cannon on a pirate ship. And how well do you guys think we met that goal?
I think we nailed it.
Yeah, we did a pretty good job delivering on the objective. We had some technical issues that we'll get into later on that prevented us from completing a full level, but we did a pretty good job finishing a demo of a game that we set out to achieve.
And I feel like we set out to achieve a game where you put pizzas in a cannon and fired them at customers from a pirate ship. And I feel like we hit that on the nail 100%.
Yeah, I mean, so a lot of the bells and whistles obviously will come later on, but I do think in general that we did a great job of that initial goal was, our MVP, our minimum viable product was met. Mm-hmm. So just for the people who have watched through the jam and who are curious, what was some of the technology that we used? Obviously Unity, but what were some of the specific tools you guys implemented?
So I'm Rich. I was one of the programmers, and I used Visual Studio 2017. We used Visual Studio Code for a little bit because it has that live share extension, which lets 2 people work on one computer, essentially. We didn't use that too much because it came to a point where there was just one person working on the code for the most part. And then we used GitHub. We had a couple problems, but GitHub primarily for keeping it up to date on the project and sharing stuff immediately with each other.
That's true. And I did a little bit of modeling. We did use some kits from the Synthi assets from the Polygon packs. I did a little bit of modeling and animation with Maya LT, which is the light version of Maya. And other than that, we used, obviously Visual Studio. I think,
I used
Photoshop.
For the menu items. Yeah.
Yep. And then we just used the inbuilt assets and obviously Unity itself and the powerful engine that it is, and we were able to get a lot of things done. Now you mentioned we had some issues. A lot of it was around GitHub and Git. Some issues. I don't know if it's a bug, but something I wanted to bring up and get your all's opinion on it is. It seems like Git does not respect prefabs. So for those of you who are familiar with Unity but not with Git, we would create a prefab, you put some things together and save it as one unit. But then when we pass it through via Git and you pull the project down, the guys would constantly see, broken prefab. And that's kind of the whole point of passing a project back and forth, is that you can use prefabs because then I can do the design work and then Eddie and Rich can assign the code, and Gordon can put the fancy UI graphics on it, and boom, it works. And that way we can all kind of just build off of each other's work. But when it's broken, you have to stop what you're doing and talk the next guy through what you just did. So I don't know what your guys' experience was. Do you think it's a bug with Git or a problem with how Unity just handles Git?
Eddie, did you want to add something to this?
Yeah, so I think it's important to acknowledge that we struggled to use Git properly. So that was the big thing to note, is that without being familiar with that technology, it is very difficult to use. And so I think one thing that we learned is that we wouldn't advise anybody else doing a game jam to just get on for the first time, have anybody that's even having one person on your team. And in this case, we had, I think, Gordon, Matt, and Rich. This was your guys' first time using it in a team environment.
No.
Or I said Gordon, Matt. Oh, did I say Rich? I meant Hector. Sorry. Gordon, Matt, and Hector hadn't ever done that. And so Hector went ahead and just sent all of his stuff to Gordon. And Gordon was putting it up there.
Mm-hmm.
And so he just didn't even try. And then there was one other person on our team who really struggled to really get on board with bringing your Git repository into your Unity project. And so there was a little bit of difficulty getting everybody on the same page to where we were using the technology in the same way. And I think that's the biggest problem that we faced. So if that resulted in any prefabs breaking, we can't really say that for sure right now, because we really struggled to use the Git properly.
And that's a good point that I hadn't thought of, is that we didn't end up using it entirely properly, but I think that opens an opportunity to have maybe a tutorial or a tutorial series on how to properly manage both tools so that they're both being used properly and that they're both taking full advantage of one another.
Yeah, it seems like there's definitely room for that.
I feel like once we were all working out of the same environment, or in the same environment rather, I felt like Git and Unity worked really well together. I don't think we had any trouble once we were all working in the same environment.
That's fair. So I think we talked already. I'm following my notes here. I think we talked already about what our roles were, but just to more briefly clarify it, do you guys want to talk about what your primary responsibilities were on the team?
Sure, I'll start. So I was asked if I could do the 2D assets. So I handled a lot of the menu items and like we said earlier, worked in Photoshop a lot. But then it kind of evolved into where anybody needed. And some of that was helping Eddie fix our Git issues. Some of it was helping Rich with a few elements in Unity itself, and then I helped Hector upload all his audio to Git.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, you were a bit of a jack of all trades there towards the end especially. And I think that one of the things that, most of what I did was the art side, more world building, using the existing assets to try to put together some things and creating assets that we were missing. But I think that Gordon especially was kind of our superstar of going around to all the different departments and making sure everybody has what they need and, filling in where possible. Hector, can't be here today with us, but I just want to speak on his behalf a little bit and say that he did a fantastic job with the music and the sound effects, very rapid prototypes, asking for feedback, very willing to make changes when we said, oh, I don't like that. We were nice about it, but, willing to make changes. And then he gave us just high quality stuff, hit after hit. So that was really nice.
Yeah, everything that was coming from Hector was spot on. That was the first time I'd ever worked like hand in hand with a sound engineer before. And so about the shark, I programmed the shark, and while I was programming the shark, I was thinking, oh, it needs to jump out of the water. Hey Hector, give me a good jump sound. It's gonna bite the pizza. Hey Hector, give me a good chomp sound. Oh, I didn't really like that chomp sound. Give it a more meaty Hulk kind of sound. It was really cool to I wasn't just searching the internet for whatever art I could find. It was really nice to have a sound engineer on our team. He did a great job.
Yeah, you were able to kind of customize it a bit more.
Yeah, and he was super cooperative. There was no pushback when we were like, not really what we're looking for. He was just right on it. He was right on it.
Yeah, no complaints at all. And I feel like there was one or two times where if it were me, I would have rolled my eyes at me. But
Yeah, and that happens anytime people work together, especially, a caveat that we may not have mentioned is this is the first time we've all worked together on a project. I've worked with these guys a lot for the pilgrimage episodes. This is my normal crew. When you guys don't see what behind the scenes is, me working on the videos, and the people I go to for help are these guys. So I'll be working on stuff and I'll say, hey guys, can you look at this code or you help me with this? Like several times, Rich and Eddie and even Gordon have I share my screen or we do VS Code. They just jump in there and help me start writing the code. So at least 60% of what you guys see is directly because of their help. So this was our first time really working together in full capacity under a crunch, and I think that we did a really great job considering. We've definitely identified that we want to continue doing this together. We want to continue working on projects, and we want to finish this game fully. And I think that we've talked about working a way to do that together so that we can be effective, so that we can make sure everybody's okay, everybody has what they need, nobody feels undervalued, nobody feels like they're underutilized, and that we are, squeezing that lemon and getting every last drop of talent out of everybody to make quality products. I really think that we are on track for that. And I think that's great. So if you have a good, close group of friends like this, it's very rare that you have a good, close group of friends and you can work in a crunch with them. That's something special.
And with a whole diverse set of skills, we all kind of bring something different to the table, which is really, really cool and unique.
Absolutely. All right, so finally, let's do a quick roundtable here of what was the biggest thing that you learned and what was your favorite thing about a jam? Because for a lot of you guys, this is your first jam experience. I've done 5 or 6 of them now, but I think Eddie and I think Gordon, this was your first one. Rich, you may have done one before, but just what was your experience of the jam and what was your favorite thing or the best thing that you learned?
Well, I learned a lot about using Git, that's for sure. I was one of them that broke Git one of the times. The second time, I broke it because I worked in the same environment as someone else. I learned not to do that again. But what went right, I learned a ton.
A little bit more.
So with Unity, you don't want to work in the same scene as somebody. So I ended up learning through this process that I need to create my own scene. Copy. I ended up copying Matt's scene, renamed it to my scene, and then I worked in prefabs in my own scene. And then when I uploaded those prefabs, it worked out nicely. It worked like a charm.
So this was my second game jam. Some things that I learned to take away was that it's really hard to, we do have a diverse group of skills, but it's really hard to divvy up certain tasks. Like it's for artists, sometimes it's easy to say, okay, you do 3D stuff and you do 2D stuff. With programmers, we do have 2 programmers on our team. It was me and Eddie had initially signed up as programmers. He was project manager and did a lot of other things, but there came a point where I guess I kind of took it all and ran with it. So if I could do it all over again, I wish I could have broken up the programming tasks a little bit better, and so that 2 people could have worked on them instead of just one hogging all the work.
And you would run into the same problem with 2 artists as well. Like, of course, I was doing the 3D stuff, a little bit of 3D stuff. I was mostly just using pre-built assets, but because I was doing 3D and Gordon was doing 2D. But if there were more than one of any job title, you're going to run into the same problem. If there was another me, right, we would both kind of be like, okay, well, who's doing what now? Because now there's the possibility of splitting up. So now you have to figure out how to split it up. And that's a problem that we ran into with the coders, just because we had more than one coder. Whereas on most teams, for most jams, it's smaller teams. It's usually like 2 or 3, so there's not as much overlap.
Yeah, but with such a small, we're just going for an MVP. There wasn't like 100 systems to design. There was only like, a small handful of 5 or 6 stuff. And my style is to just kind of build everything up all at once, so I have an idea of how each system interacts with each other. And I think I kind of boxed out Eddie a little bit, and I apologize.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely didn't wedge my way in there. And this is something. So we're still on the what did you learn topic, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So my role was initially supposed to be programmer, and then I was like, hey, it seems like we don't have anybody that's filling that role of identifying tasks and kind of building a battle plan beforehand. And so I did step into that role and just went through and was asking all the questions necessary from a high level to set up that foundation So then from there, we knew, okay, these are all the elements to the game that we're going to need. And then each of those elements is going to need this art. And each of those elements is going to need this programming or animation. So the art, the animation, and the programming for each of the different elements in the game, whether it's a UI element or a design element like the ship or a functional element like the cannon. Each of those needs to have an animation, art, and programming logic to support it. And so we went through and we mapped out all of that. And I got distracted for a second. And then I turn and Rich already has like a framework for the whole system kind of like sketched out. I look and I was like, okay, I was distracted for about 20 minutes there. But seems like Rich pretty much has got it covered right now because there's not a lot of separate systems in what so we identified different things that needed done, but we didn't segment them into systems. So a lot of times when you have a character, you have a health system and a movement system that together make up the combat system. But in this case, it was just there wasn't that level of we didn't have that ability to really dichotomize the different systems, and so it all kind of became one system. Rich had that all in his head, and so I didn't really want to corner into it. And so I kind of just stayed on the line and eventually got off the line after sitting there silently for like an hour or so. It's like, okay, I'm going to drift off. So going into like what did you learn? I think the biggest thing that I learned is that we need to have somebody that kind of owns the vision for the project. So this is separate from kind of managing the tasks and outlining it the way that I did in this case, but more like somebody who is assigned with imagining this from start to finish. Like I'm just imagining all of it. And then I might go in and do the 3D art, and that'd be my delegation of tasks. Like, okay, I'm delegating the 3D art to myself. But then also having a couple of programming guys that it's like, hey guys, can you please take care of the programming? And then if there's any sort of issues that arise, they can come to me and say like, hey, I don't really feel like I'm serving any purposes right now. What do you want me doing? And it's like, well, I asked you to do the programming. It's like, right now I feel kind of cornered out by Rich. And then it's like, okay, fine. I'm going to put down my 3D art for this next 5 minutes. It's probably going to cost me 30 minutes of productivity, but I'm going to spend 5 minutes sitting here with you guys and figure out, okay, what do you need to do? And so future forward, this is something that we talked about. Any projects that we do in the future, we're going to have somebody who's just kind of the product owner. Who gets to make those decisions and doesn't need to feel bad about just kind of making a judgment call and being like, hey guys, this is the direction that we're going, and giving that authority. So then the others on the team, if I'm the programmer that's being a problem child, I don't feel bad when somebody makes a judgment call because I gave him that authority up front. Right. And so I think that's the big thing that I learned is that need. And then the attached concept that I learned is that I can be frustrated with a process or kind of like a task that's happening. And so Rich's process, the way that he was doing his work, I didn't really like. I didn't really jive with it. It didn't really flow with me. But I can dislike that process and not dislike Rich. I can dislike that process and know like, hey, when it comes time for us to get back together and talk, Rich is a really good guy. We are friends. We like each other. We both want to respect each other. And we will be able to work through this once it comes time to get back into conversation mode. And so that was another really big thing that I learned is that it's really important to remember that we are all friends, even if we have kind of a hiccup in our processes. And I don't think there's any way to avoid that. So anybody else that gets into a game jam with your friends, like know in advance, you're probably going to hate one of their processes during the project in that moment, but it speaks nothing to the quality of the human.
If I could touch on that, part of a game jam is the crunch and the desire to stay up really late and get everything done. And as you stay up late, you start to tolerances and coping start to go out the window, and normal
Absolutely.
everyday things just become really hard to deal with when you're not as well rested as before. So that's a big thing I learned is staying up late is tempting, but it's borrowed time.
That's true.
That's a good point. That's a really good point.
And if you don't like a process, it might be because you don't understand it. I know a couple times I've run this with artists in the past is I saw somebody doing something and I was like, that's going to take so much time and I don't get it and I don't like it. And I was frustrated. I didn't say anything, but I was frustrated. And then just an hour later, all of a sudden what they did opened up and they were just slamming things out. And I was like, oh, I see what you were doing now. I understand now that you were doing this to get to this. So now it opens up this window. But absolutely, I think one of the big things that,
That's a good point.
that you touched on that I think is a good lesson for any project that anyone does ever is organization is key. And no matter how prepared you think you are when you go in, you're not prepared enough. There's always something more you can do. So I think one of the things that that Eddie brought to us, which was amazing, is a website called Hack and Plan, which is a great website. It's very similar to, well, I use Trello to organize a lot of stuff, but Hack and Plan is really designed for more of like an agile framework where you're saying, here are the tasks, here are the subtasks, here are the phases they're in, here are the sprints that we're a part of, and that helps you to really organize better. And I think that maybe having like a template for a game jam with that would be great. You could assign ahead of time, like, we don't know what the game is going to be yet, but we know there's going to be art. And we know there's going to be music. We know there's going to be coding. And we know we can define things like major system, minor system, flair over here, whatever. So you can break it down and have some organization right from the get-go as soon as the gun goes off and we all start running. And I think better organization with anything is always an improvement. And that's something that every project can benefit from. All right, so we talked about that, which is definitely something that we can do better next time. Obviously with any project is better organization. But let's talk for the last couple of minutes here. Let's just talk about the fact that one of the things that I brought up to somebody was a lot of the problems that indies face is that you don't have a finished product to point to yet, right? We're all game developers. We all have it in our heart and soul, but there's nothing on the shelf yet. You can't show anybody that you've finished something because you're in the middle of the work, which is fine. If you're at that point where you haven't made something yet, that's great. You're on your way, And even when you have made something, that doesn't mean that you're done. That just means, okay, what's next? But something that I felt really strongly about and I thought was really great was now I can say I'm a game developer. Like, literally, we made a game. It goes from, a certain point and then it hits a trigger and it loops back to the menu. But you know what? It works. You can play the game. You can get score. It has music. It has a menu. It has sound effects. It has animations. It has all that stuff. It works. It does the main, what they call the game loop. What is the thing you're doing, right? Like in Super Smash Brothers, the game loop is beat the crap out of each other, they go flying, and then you can come back to the station, right? So that's the main loop. So as long as you've made that, the rest of it is really just detail and decoration, really, honestly. So the fact that now that we've done that, that's like a badge of honor, and that really gives me a lot of gusto to say, now let's go forward to what's next. And don't think that because you've made one, you're done. A lot of people say, they talk about one of the biggest things ever was Angry Birds a couple years back, right? Everybody's like, oh, they were an overnight success. Not true. Not true in the least. Angry Birds, for those of you who don't know, I think it's Roxio, I can't quite pronounce their company, that was their 53rd game. 53rd. That means there were 52 other times they made a game, marketed it, maybe you've never heard of it, you probably have never heard of it, which means 52 other times they made a game and you've never heard of it. That's one game a week for an entire year. And, that's not the pace that they had. But, what I'm saying is it's a lot of games. And then the last one was the one that they really hit it big. So keep swinging. You're going to make a lot of things that nobody plays or nobody enjoys, but you enjoy it and it was fun for you. And even if you hate it at the end, if you're like, this is the worst game ever made, I just want to delete all the files, doesn't matter. You still learned, you still grew, you still got some skills out of it, you still practiced. You are now better than when you started. So I just wanted to leave that with you guys that, just because you haven't finished the game yet doesn't matter. But if you have, then it really helps to kind of push you forward even more. And I'm even more excited than ever to make games because now I have something I can show people on my phone and they giggle. They're like, oh, that's funny. You're delivering pizzas via a pirate ship. I'm like, yeah. And so then it just makes me smile and that gives me energy to go forward.
I like what you said. Better than when you started. That kind of speaks to the title. This is the Level Up Game Jam, and when you level up, you're better than when you started.
Exactly. That was the whole point, was for us as creative people to level up our skills, to show potential employers or to show the world that we can do it ourselves, to say, hey, we're now better than when we started. We are taking steps to improve ourselves without anybody pushing us to do so, just because we want to be better. All right, so any closing thoughts from you guys before we close out for the day? Anything last words you guys want to get in? And anything you want to say, Gordon?
No, I'm all set. I think we're good. When's our next jam?
Exactly. Anything for you, Eddie or Rich?
I'd do it again.
That's good to hear.
Yeah, I'd do it again. Just I think we need to make sure that we have product owner to kind of be the visionary once
And
we
I will,
decide on a topic. I think
will
that'd be the
double
big
down-
saver.
I will double down on what I know on GitHub and make sure, like, I'm really
And we will test GitHub before we start.
All right. Well, I want to thank you guys for joining me. I'm going to try and cut this off before we hit the half-hour mark, so you guys aren't bored. Hope you've enjoyed the footage in the background. I'll be putting footage of the live streams that I tried to do to give you guys a little behind-the-scenes poke. And I tried to watch some of the other guys' streams. We were on Discord the whole time, so you can see some of their work as well. And I will provide in the download, in the link rather, in the description, so you can go and download the game and play it with some instructions. And please have fun, enjoy. And if you guys who are on the call with me here, if you guys have any portfolios, any links, anything you want me to share, please let me know. I will definitely do so. And until next time, guys, as always, keep practicing, get better, and I'll see you next time as the pilgrimage continues.